Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to the Belgium and EU side event. Well, for all of us on the front table, I have to say this has been an exciting afternoon because 3 of candidates got elected that you see either state parties or associated organizations have got the seat at the CRPD committee. Is the Jamaican candidate, EU candidate, and as we said already, first time in the history of UN this has happened, and also first time in the history of European Union this has happened, and also Uruguayan candidate that is very well known to our colleagues from ONCE. So it is a celebratory moment, and please, a big applause for all. We also congratulate, of course, to all the others who got elected within the 9 members. For those maybe who did not get elected this time, do not give up. Do not give up, because it's important. It's important that there are lots of candidates and that a word of importance of the topic is spread around. Here today we are to reflect on a slightly different topic than the CRPD committee, which is the right to work for persons with disabilities. I'm extremely pleased again today that I have on my right side our Commissioner for Equality, Ms. Helena Dalli, who already mentioned in her interventions the disability employment package, but who is going to tell you how we took it on board in the EU, and then we will follow up with the other speakers. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Katarina, and I thank the Belgian presidency for organizing this very important exchange. It's a subject very close to my heart because we know that many persons with disabilities are not able to reach their full potential because they don't have access to the labor market. And so this is essentially what we are working on. As party to the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the European Union is committed to forge a society where persons with disabilities can participate on an equal basis with others, where they can live independently and make autonomous decisions about their everyday lives. The European Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities recognizes that participation in employment is the best way to ensure economic autonomy and social inclusion. In recent years, the EU and other state parties have boosted their focus on equality and inclusion in public policies. Nevertheless, today, only about 50% of persons with disabilities are in employment in the EU. Of those, many work part-time, precariously, or are likely to retire early. In the last decade, we witnessed a continuous increase in the general employment rate. Nevertheless, the gap between the rate of those with and without disabilities has persisted at around 21.4 percentage points. And women, young and older workers with disabilities, are particularly affected. Persons with disabilities of working age amount to almost 1/5 of the whole EU working population. Ensuring quality employment for everyone is both a matter of rights and brings positive outcomes for society. For this reason, equalizing the labor market participation of persons with disabilities is a priority in the European Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. To that end, we have put on the table a disability employment package. It covers all stages from recruitment to retention of persons with disabilities in quality employment. It includes several toolkits and guidelines which aim to support member states. One example is the toolkit targeting public employment services. provides information and advice on which services to offer, on active labour market measures and reasonable accommodation, amongst others. The package also includes a catalogue of best practices to encourage the hiring of persons with disabilities and combat stereotypes, as well as a guidance for adult learning. It has been developed together with key stakeholders, including public employment services, social partners, and civil society organizations. This has ensured that the package is practical to use and responds to real needs. In addition, the European Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities invites member states to set employment and adult learning targets for persons with disabilities by 2024, and we are currently following up this work. Lack of awareness and misconceptions about persons with disabilities lead to their exclusion from the labour market. Therefore, improving the situation requires a range of measures. Almost 25 years ago, we adopted one of the most central EU equality laws, the Employment Equality Directive. It lays down a general framework for combating discrimination in the area of employment and occupation, and prohibits direct and indirect discrimination based on disability. The scope of the directive includes conditions for access to employment, including section criteria, recruitment conditions, access to vocational guidance, training, and working conditions. The Employment Equality Directive also requires employers to provide reasonable accommodation to persons with disabilities. This means that employers must take appropriate measures to enable persons with disabilities to have access to, participate in, or advance in employment, or to undergo training. These measures are an obligation to the extent that they do not impose a disproportionate burden on the employer. I also stress the important role of the European Accessibility Act in supporting employment for persons with disabilities. It requires that from June of next year, certain products and services with a strong digital component can only be placed on the market if they are accessible. We are talking about computers and operating systems, telephones and e-books, as well as transport and e-commerce. Accessible devices and services have great potential to facilitate the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the workplace. We are already seeing a positive impact on the job market as big ICT companies are seeking to recruit persons with disabilities, their products and services accessible. This said, it is clear that much work remains to be done. By learning from and inspiring each other, we will contribute to improved labour market participation for persons with disabilities and guarantee more inclusive societies for all. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. As you said, so much has been done and so much has been going on with the employment possibilities and opportunities of persons with disabilities, but you also said that the efforts need to be stepped up in this regard, and I'm pretty sure that we will follow up on your wise words. Now I would like to give the floor to the Honorable Norman Dunn. You will correct me with the interpretation. He is the State Minister in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security in Jamaica. So we are very much looking forward to hear what you, and from your perspective, have to share with us about employment of persons with disability. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Her Excellency Elena Daly, Commissioner for Equality, European Commission, distinguished panelists, excellencies, delegates, good afternoon. I'm pleased to share with you on this area of priority for us as a nation, Jamaica is delighted to provide an update on the progress being made in its implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. We refer to the constructive dialogue in March 2022 and note the commendations and principal areas of concern and recommendations provided in the concluding remarks. We further refer to our presentation at COSP17 in June 2023. Jamaica maintains its commitment to the progressive resolution of the concern and is intent on making more significant advancements with the Disabilities Act 2014 now in effect. This act established the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, as a body corporate, along with the establishment of a Disabilities Rights Tribunal, DRT, to promote, protect, and ensure the rights of persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities and their caregiver now have an avenue of redress of discrimination through the DRT. This provision is an important first step towards the ratification of the protocol to the CRPD. Accordingly, we now report that the DRT is now in operation and has its first hearing on May 21, 2024. 4 other cases have been investigated and referred to the DRT, and these should be heard during the financial year 2024-2025. Following the implementation of the Disabilities Act in 2022, Jamaica has been incrementally recognizing the rights of persons with disabilities to work. This is being done through a number of ways, including 1, safeguarding and promoting the realization of the right to work, including for those who acquire disabilities during employment by taking appropriate steps through legislation to prohibit discrimination in the workplace on the basis of having a disability. The Disabilities Act stipulates that an employer should not treat differently a person with disability who is otherwise qualified for employment in relation to the person's recruitment and career advancement. Furthermore, where an employee acquires a disability, an employer is to redeploy the individual to a post that matches his or her current skills and abilities in a manner that does not result in the individual losing any pay or benefits. Importantly, an employer is required to implement reasonable arrangements for employees and prospective employees to ensure that they are not at a disadvantage in accessing workplace. 2, a draft code of practice on employment has been crafted and will be finalized this year. This code provides guidance on the recruitment and selection process of persons with disabilities. In instances where a person with a disability lacks experience or on-the-job training, the code will urge employers to offer work experiences to these applicants. Critically, all employers are implored by the code to implement a disabilities management strategy, which includes the creation of an inclusive policy and a disability focal point. Trade union organizations are exhorted to encourage persons with disabilities to join a union and actively represent their interests for persons with disabilities to employers. Employees with disabilities should become self-advocates and educate their employers on how to create an inclusive and accessible workspace. 3, as a country, we are guaranteeing a safe and healthy work environment for employees with disabilities through a national occupational safety and health bill and also the implementation of the Sexual Harassment Act. A simplified version has been produced in Braille and entitled 10 Things to Know About Jamaica's Sexual Harassment Act. In addition, the government through an amendment to its Public Service Staff Order 2024, now grants paternity leaves to fathers in the public sector, which includes fathers with disabilities. Of note, below is a list of successful initiatives implemented to mainstream the training and employment of individuals with disabilities. These include: the government has trained farmers who have disabilities, and a batch of 3 farmers are to participate in overseas employment program for the very first time. B, the Abilities Foundation is also working with Heart Trust NSTA to provide skills training to persons with disabilities. C, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security has been approached for recruitment and partnership with a business processing outsourcing company for the recruitment of 200 persons with disabilities. And the first matter brought before the DRT in relationship to a teacher with psychosocial disorder as well as employment. And D, the National Commercial Bank, our largest commercial bank in Jamaica, offers recruitment for persons who are deaf in this sector. The National Housing Trust, Jamaica's premier housing provider, offers a grant of 300,000 Jamaican dollars to employees with disabilities to retrofit their homes. The government, through the council, has established a minimum standard for the purpose of adjustments or arrangements in accordance with national law and international best practices. We'll also invite employers to participate in or sponsor awareness-raising campaign on disabilities and employment. The council is also assisting with job coaching and resume writing. The government is already playing an integral role in the employment of persons with disability through its national policy on disabilities, and has indicated that at least 5% of persons with disabilities are to be in its employ. This 5%, however, is only a baseline, and the government is encouraging the private sector to include more persons with disabilities in the recruitment pool. The government, ministries are engaging in projects that empowers female entrepreneurs, women with disabilities, to build strong, economically and viable, sustainable business. A person with disability can get an economic grant of up to 150,000 Jamaican dollars, or a group of persons with disabilities, a maximum of $450,000. Additionally, to ensure greater social protection, the Registrar General Department now issues birth certificates in Braille. And finally, Jamaica maintains its commitment to its obligations under the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and will continue to make significant strides in its implementation. Jamaica is mobilized and is actively implementing the rights of persons with disabilities in accordance with 17 of the Charter. We anticipate the future of work in the creation of an inclusive society, and our position on work, technology, artificial intelligence can be of significant help in guaranteeing the rights of persons with disabilities to work. As a country, we hereby reaffirm our commitment to the CRPD and look forward to a fruitful discussion which could promote partnership in areas such as these. I thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing in such a variety in which area persons with disabilities can work, because we often see that some perceive that persons with disabilities could be really engaged in certain type of activities and occupations, but you have shown the wide range and how it is being done, and good luck to you in Jamaica. Now, beyond, I already have been thanking the Belgium colleagues so many times We also had the joint EU and the Belgium breakfast with EU member states. We are organizing this side event together. But now I really have the opportunity to give the floor to Sarah Janssens. Sarah will be speaking on behalf of the Belgian presidency and also on behalf of the Minister Lalieu, who, due to European elections, could not be with us. But Sarah, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Katharina, for the floor. Dear Excellencies, dear all, thank you for being here. The employment of persons with disabilities in Belgium represents a significant structural challenge. In 2022, their employment rate was only 44% compared to a general employment rate of 76% for the population aged 20 to 64. While Belgium benefits from a strong and effective social protection, access to employment for persons with disabilities is crucial for their inclusion in society and protection from poverty. Both the government and the private sector must do more to improve the access for persons with disabilities, access to work for persons with disabilities. As public authorities, we should lead by example. The current Belgian government and all levels of government are working towards improving the employment rates and access to quality jobs for persons with disabilities. To achieve the employment rate target set in Belgium at 3% in the federal public sector, specific recruitment channels have recently been created. Furthermore, all federal administrations have been sensitized about the importance of taking concrete action and their obligations to provide reasonable accommodations. Budgets have been allocated to adapt teleworking and working stations, and several inclusive employer branding campaigns have been rolled out to promote the federal public government as with an organizational culture open to all. And this is bearing fruit, because for the first time in several years, the federal public employment rate for persons with disabilities increased last year, even though the target is far from being met. Belgium also invested strongly in removing potential hurdles for persons with disabilities to take the step to the job market. One such barrier, for example, was that persons with disabilities who sought to enter the labor market were afraid, and understandably so, of losing their benefits and were therefore reluctant to take the step. The loss of the safety net represented by social benefits and the resulting insecurity deterred many people with disabilities who were willing and able to work from doing so. To remedy this, the combination of disability allowances and income from work is now allowed for a period of 2 years for persons with disabilities who were previously unemployed. This measure allows people to discover their abilities, to gradually integrate into the world of work, and to determine what level of professional responsibility they can assume, all without a fear of losing their benefits. That are, of course, needed to cover for the costs associated. In addition, Belgium has focused on creating additional employment opportunities and also on retaining people in employment. For example, by simplifying the startup of self-employment activity for persons with disabilities and through reinforced return-to-work trajectories with return-to-work coordinators. In the context of a high number of workers on long-term sick leave, this is an important policy to support employers and employees to remain in employment. The existing return-to-work access routes have been made more accessible and visible, and new access routes have been opened up. Initial figures show a significant positive impact on partial return-to-work figures. Further measures are foreseen to monitor the diversity at sectoral level. The government will provide data on diversity, including disability, to the sectorial social dialogue committees in their respective sectors on a 2-yearly basis. If there are unexplained differences between sector-level results regarding diversity, an action plan to eliminate these differences will need to be drawn up. The committee that monitors this policy also includes disability advisory bodies. The aim of this approach is to increase transparency with regard to diversity, stimulate inclusive recruitment, and strengthen the accountability of social partners. The Belgian Minister for Persons with Disabilities, Minister Lalieu, and the Minister of Labour recently met with the Belgian social partners at a roundtable discussion to make employer and employee representatives aware of the realities of workers with a disability. One of the recurring messages that is heard from the side of employers is the need for clear and easily accessible information regarding existing resources and support measures for employers and persons with disabilities. While there may be a will to hire persons with disabilities, employees with disabilities and employers in both the private and public sector are often faced with a lack of resources or the specific knowledge to facilitate inclusion in the labor market. While much information and resources are available, they are dispersed between different levels and actors of government. Therefore, the Interministerial Conference on Disability, the permanent collaboration platform for the federal, regional, and community ministers responsible for disability and equal opportunities, decided last month to set up a knowledge platform on well-being at work for persons with disabilities. This platform will consist of a website bringing together useful information such as financial and technical support measure and information regarding the legislative framework for employers and employees with a disability. Thanks for your attention. I conclude.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Now we will move to the voices beyond the national governments. First, we will hear from our dear guest, Güler Kotze. She's a disability, she's working within the Disability Inclusion and Gender Equality of the ILO's Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion branch, and she's specialized in human rights and diversity and inclusion. So we are very much looking forward to hear your perspective, what really does matter for the employment of persons with disabilities. Güler, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here as well. As you may know, the International Labour Organization is the UN specialized agency in the world of work, and we are governed by our member states, our 187 member states, but also by the most representative employers and workers organizations in each country. So we are a tripartite organization. So we were offered to answer different questions today, and I will take them one by one, if you allow me. And the first question on the way that worker and employer organizations contribute to the employment of persons with disabilities. From the ILO side, last year we did a brief study on how much social dialogue and collective bargaining were addressing the needs of persons with disabilities. And we found very little initiatives, and the initiatives that we found were mostly related to company level. So not really at national or regional or global level. The interest in the private sector, however, to the employment of persons with disabilities has been growing, and we have supported that in the context of the Global Business Disability Network, which is a network, as you know, as you may know, of 40 multinational companies which are committed to build their capacity, but also make commitments on the employment of and retention of persons with disabilities. But with regard to that question, also in this network, it's also composed of 40 national business disability networks. And these networks are mostly hosted by the general employer federations in their country, a lot of them in the global south, and in particular the case is for India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, or Chile, just to name a few. We have also seen an increasing, but still insufficient interest of unions of inclusion of persons with disabilities. The interest was more at global level, I have to say. So, for example, we had some work with global trade union federations like PSI, Public Sector International. Also, we have also worked with Education International. And those organizations have been doing those unions have been doing some work on persons with disabilities, including with us. And there are also some national, quite a lot of national trade unions who have been starting to include the rights of persons with disabilities in their work. But that has been less concrete for now. The second question that we were asked was also to talk about the inclusion of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in social dialogue. From our side, so what we have seen is that in a number of countries, of course, there is tripartite social dialogue, which is composed of governments, employer federations, and worker organizations. It is opening up to persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, but very slowly, actually. It's first, we have seen that it's, before that, it's opening a bit more easily to other civil society organizations, like those representing women, youth, or informal workers. We don't have, although some openings are, as I said, are made with organizations of persons with disease, is not to the point that we would have good practices to highlight, although I hope that in the next years I can say differently. As a consequence, disability inclusion is often not addressed in initiatives where social dialogue is being applied. And although including, for example, in development of national employment plans, social protection, and systems, and the future employment, for example, and other areas. The ILO promotes the concept of social dialogue in an inclusive way, and it should lead to more sustainable employment, also in the framework of the SDGs. I can say one good example of good practices between, collaboration between organizations of persons with disabilities and some unions have been some joint submissions made to the CRPD committee of alternative reports. So that we have seen a bit, and we are starting to see that a bit more. And the third question, we were asked about the policies and measures of governments could promote the employment of persons with disabilities. The policy measures from governments are many, both in terms of legislations and also specific policies and programs. So this is good. But I would, however, highlight that although many countries have specific laws, strategies, and are making progress in terms of programs and policies, much more needs to be done to make sure that these initiatives are growing and reach public employment services, vocational training, youth employment, to name just a few. And hoping that those would be fully accessible to persons with disabilities. So just to finish, I would say that it's true that governments are, as a pillar of tripartite work, could have a great impact on that regard. And I will stop here, and happy to answer questions if we have time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for indeed addressing such a various aspects relevant for the employment and the employment perspectives. Now, our next speaker comes from, she's a director for advocacy and communication at the African Disability Forum. It is the continental membership organization of organizations of persons with disabilities in Africa. Her name is Shitaye Astaves. Please, you have the floor, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Distinguished delegates, invited guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is African Voice Now. Promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities to employment, and as it is stipulated in the UNCRPD Article 27, is a crucial in nurturing, first and foremost, self-confidence of persons with disabilities, maintain equity in bringing about economic empowerment and self-reliance of persons with disabilities, to create enabling environment, as well as to increase productivity and decrease economic loss. However, the reality is far from this, and the available statistics do tell the story as follows. The international level organization, ILO, has reported that persons with disabilities are more likely to be employed than persons without disabilities in more than half of countries with available data. The ILO data shows that the median unemployment rate for persons with disabilities is 7.6% compared to the 6% of persons without disabilities. The ILO also notes that persons with disabilities are less likely to work in high-skilled occupations. Likewise, UN stated that unemployment rate for persons with disabilities is 26%, and that is over 5 times higher than the 5 rate for persons without disabilities. According to the United Nations, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities varies by country and development level, whereby for developing countries, 80 to 90% of working age persons with disabilities are unemployed. But in industrialized countries, 50 to 70% of working age people with disabilities are unemployed. The situation of challenges and barriers for women with disabilities and underrepresented groups, including those with deaf blindness and psychosocial impairment, is worse. The figures are not good, and we are not yet there to ensure inclusion in the hemisphere of work and employment. In most situations where persons with disabilities employed, provision of reasonable accommodation continuously jeopardized and persons with disabilities made to live in continuous fear of losing their income. The question could be, what can be done to change the grim scenario, and in context of mobilizing all the 3 stakeholders? Then I would, in summary, say there is need for increased commitment and at all levels. Development partners should support and motivate national governments, the private sectors, and trade unions as strategic partners, and through investing on transfer of technical knowledge, skills, and capacity building interventions, so to see progress in changing the narrative on disability and promote inclusion in work and employment. Build on partnership with representative organizations of persons with disabilities and ensure the presence of right holders' voice during negotiation and dialogue is also critical. Follow up to holistic approach in areas of promotion, on-job training, and the likes, and invest in establishment of sustainable coordination and monitoring mechanism at national level could also contribute to change this worst scenario. Increase use of technology and innovation. Give recognition to champions to include employers through organizing, for instance, an annual award ceremony, job fair, and documenting changes made through captured stories and video clips could also promote inclusion. Last but not least, organize experience sharing visits and learning sessions between countries are some of the essential factors to bring and promote inclusion in work and employment. I thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you also, as you said, the African voice has been heard, and very much looking if we will have maybe some comments or some questions from the group. But before, we still have 2 speakers, and I apologize because we might be running slightly beyond the schedule because as well as you could see, the elections took a bit of time, but I believe we will have sufficient time to reflect. So our next speaker comes from ONCE. ONCE is a very well-known foundation. Javier is Director of International Relations at ONCE Social, and also Executive Vice President of the ONCE Foundation for Latin America, and many other titles you have, Javier, but I will stop here and give you the floor because ONCE indeed does what it preaches, or puts in action employment of persons with disabilities in an excellent manner. So please go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the European Commission and the Belgian government for this invitation. I would like just to go very quickly in my presentation to have also some time for discussion. Well, 4 things I would like to speak. First of all, what is ONCE Foundation? ONCE Foundation was created 35 years ago by the National Organization of the Blind in Spain. And we devote our activities in 2 main areas. accessibility, and employment. We really try to focus on two main issues for persons with disabilities that we consider are key elements for the lives of persons with disabilities. So our foundation, inside their activities to promote the employment of persons with disabilities, has created a program. The program is called For Talent, Inserta For Talent for persons with disabilities. And there are three elements I would like to speak about this program. First of all, it's made about alliances. We had an alliance with the European Commission for more than 20 years because this program is co-funded through the European Social Fund. So we, on the foundation, we are an intermediate body, meaning an organization that receives the funds from the European Commission through the European Social Fund in order to implement activities just to promote the employment of persons with disabilities all over Spain. The second main alliance is with the civil society. Civil society because the board of trustees of the ONCE Foundation is made out of all organizations of persons with disabilities in Spain. All of them, they have their say in the way ONCE Foundation implement its program for the promotion of employment of persons with disabilities. The third item in the alliances is with companies. Our program has created a forum of companies in order to promote the employment of persons with disabilities by the private sector in Spain in order to make sure that companies get closer to the idea of promoting employment internally of persons with disabilities. So we have an employment forum and all companies in Spain are included. We still have a main challenge in Spain because we have big companies in our forum, but we are still missing a big percentage of small and medium-sized enterprises. In Spain, 98% of the population work in small and medium enterprises. So we are really trying to focus also in that direction to make it better. And we also work with public authorities to make sure that the program also receives the support and promote employment in the public sector. The second element of our program is the method. We need information on the situation of employment of persons with disabilities. Through our program, we have an observatory of the employment market for persons with disabilities in Spain. It is very important to detect where are the main areas to find a job in Spain for persons with disabilities. We need to know more than just the unemployment figures, what is the real picture on the situation of employment of persons with disabilities to make sure that our program really targets all the aims and the needs of persons with disabilities in the labor market in Spain. So we promote information. It is a program made, as Ekaterina mentioned before, from persons with disabilities to persons with disabilities, because ONCE Foundation is an organization of persons with disabilities promoting this program. We have also, and is the third element of our methodology, applied technology in the implementation of the program. We have created in Spain something which is called the Disability Hub, which is training persons with disabilities to work in areas linked to technology, the new needs of the labor market for the future. For example, one of the best experts in Spain in cybersecurity are persons with disabilities, thanks to the Disability Hub of ONCE Foundation. And finally, the results is the last element of my presentation. We have the possibility to have today an information of 200,000 people looking for a job in Spain, all of them persons with disabilities. Every year, 9,000 people in Spain find a job thanks to the program of ONCE Foundation. We have also programs specifically for women that has suffered violence, domestic violence. So there is a specific program to promote their rights and their capacity to go out of that situation thanks to employment. So I would like just to mention that this is really thanks, as I mentioned, to a whole cooperation with the European Commission and the European Union for these 20 last years. And definitely we believe that is making a difference in the society in Spain for the employment of persons with disabilities. And thank you again for the floor and for allowing us to present this model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier. And now we go to our last speaker. His name is Alex Campbell from International Trade Union Confederation. And he's one of the directors there in I understood the Washington office, so very much looking forward to hear what you have to say from the perspective of the global labor movements with and the link that you see with all the other relevant aspects for the employment of persons with disabilities. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Your Excellencies and all who are gathered here today. I'm honored to participate in this valuable conversation today. Thank you to Belgium and the European Commission for pulling this together and making it the event that it is. So my name is Alex Campbell. I'm the Washington Office Director of the International Trade Union Confederation. Our affiliates represent nearly 200 million workers in more than 160 countries. And for trade unions, freedom of association, collective bargaining, social dialogue, occupational safety and health. These are fundamental rights that make decent work possible for anyone. If workers can't get together to improve things in their workplace, they can't raise awareness of issues at work, you can't tell the truth without fear of reprisals, then we cannot have equal work for all. The process of social dialogue based on accountability, supported by worker activities and by policies like the ones we're discussing today, on the other hand, allow workers to raise issues at work, whether it's excessive noise on the floor, poorly adapted or equipped workplaces, poor access to ingress and egress, overly burdensome workloads, something that affects, some of these affect all workers from the time they clock in to the time they clock out. But beyond that, this kind of framework for social dialogue also allows employers to move away from kind of short-term mindsets on cost cutting, where they're trying to save money, to a long-term mindset of investing in well-trained, productive, and safe workforces. This dynamic holds true of all workers in all jobs. It's particularly acute for marginalized workers and workers that face discrimination. And for workers with disabilities, these tenets of decent work and these kind of processes of building towards it are particularly important because of the high levels of discrimination they face at work, and in particular exclusion that prevents them from joining and remaining in the workforce at all. And many of our colleagues here today have discussed the kind of depths of a lot of these problems. But to get there, to get to a place where employers are investing in adaptations, training, and accommodations, and workers are able to create a workforce that is adapted to their needs, requires a stronger bargaining relationship and requires some accountability. And we find that relationship and that accountability between workers and their employers in a context of social dialogue. And these, freedom of association and social dialogue, however, are not sufficient in and of themselves. We need the meaningful and explicit participation of disabled workers in their organizations and in their workplaces, within their trade unions, within their national contexts, within their workplaces. And that's why we look very positively upon situations where workers with disabilities in the United Kingdom, with the TUC in Brazil, have created robust networks of workers with disabilities in their countries, in their trade unions, in their workplaces. The COTU in Kenya has collaborated with international partners to launch a program to increase inclusion of workers with disabilities, especially women, in the workforce, with an emphasis on particular sectors and particular large employers in Kenya. And finally, that organizing by workers with disabilities, building power within their trade unions and through their trade unions in their workplace in their countries, can not only transform those institutions, but can advocate for policies that boost inclusion. We've seen the CLC in Canada, the CGT in France, UGT in Spain, produce detailed guides for promoting social dialogue and collective bargaining in their unions and their national contexts. And these focus on strengthening the voice of workers with disabilities in their workforce negotiations. And since 2018, the TUC in Britain has been documenting discrepancies in pay and employment for workers with disabilities, releasing an annual report with the data and calling for accountability and calling for change. So in summary, for the trade union movement, the path toward greater inclusion and greater results for workers with disabilities has two key components. On the one hand, basic labor rights that are for us applicable and totally necessary for all workers must be protected to guarantee decent work. And that means freedom of association, collective bargaining, social dialogue, OSH, among other things. And without these rights, workers with disabilities will have a harder time expressing what they need to contribute fully to the workplace and creating the kind of space where they can contribute fully in employment. And finally, this dynamic can create a dynamic where employers are able to invest in a long-term workforce. And finally, it's crucial that workers with disabilities are able to organize themselves to promote equality and inclusion within their trade unions and at work. And trade unions should support these workers and are in many of the contexts that I discussed earlier to ensure their needs are incorporated into the demands of the trade union movement at the bargaining table, in the halls of government, and on the streets. So thank you to all.
Thank you. Big thanks to all of the speakers for excellent presentation. We do have 2 or 3 minutes left. If there is somebody who would like to share with us what he or she, yes, I know, and I noticed this is the representative from the Belgium Civil Society. So with a great pleasure, I give you the floor.
Thank you. My name is Pierre Giesling. As you said, I'm the president of the Belgian Disability Forum. And on the first question, we have, of course, not an answer, but we still have a comment. We think that at this moment, the worker and employment organizations have not done to the full of what they could do. The National Labour Council in Belgium has worked through the years on some themes related to persons with disabilities, for instance, equal treatment during selections and the pay level of persons with disabilities. The pay level, sorry. But I'm getting to lose my voice, sorry. But no concrete engagement have been made to realize the equal treatment together with the social partners. Equal treatment is not achieved by foreseeing it on paper, but by taking actions such as support of the people with disabilities, awareness raising among employers, and rapprochement to workers with disabilities. Why couldn't they put in the next interprofessional accord a target of X percent of persons with disabilities in employment in the private sector? We have the 3% in the authorities, but they still not reach it. So why couldn't they put a certain percentage on employment in the private sector? I keep it at that.
Thank you very much. And also, we in Brussels are quite familiar with all the challenges that you are facing, and Belgium is no exception within EU member states, with the gap between employment rate of persons with and without disabilities is quite high. But maybe just for the remaining of our colleagues in our strategy for the rights of the persons with disabilities, we ask member states, and we are now in a process of addressing the member states to set the targets how to close the gap between employment of persons with and without disabilities. It's a really, I would dare to say, a long way to go, but the pressure and impetus to move towards employment has to be somehow kept.
So I do agree that more needs to be done in the private sector, but I realize in the case of Jamaica that we have, as a policy, indicated, and I mentioned it earlier, a 5% within the government, the public system, and that is just the minimum. It can be much more, and we're actually encouraging our private sector to follow suit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Erin Brown with the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities in the Bahamas. And so I have a question that's kind of twofold for the ILO and the Trade Union Confederation. I know that the ratification of the ILO ratification of the Convention 159, have you found that member states or countries have improved their commitment and implementation once they have ratified that specific number, that convention? And for the trade union, in the collective bargaining, as well as being able to recruit, retain, and advance employees, professionals with disabilities, have you seen an uptick in that actually happening through the trade union, through the collective bargaining? Are we participating more actively now, seeing that we are driving more inclusive conversation and awareness?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Interesting question. I'm also looking forward to hear the reply. Who wants to take it first? Ailo?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. It is indeed still hard for persons with disabilities, and as I said, their representative organizations to enter tripartism and also these spaces and also work with unions. There is some interest of unions at national levels, but not good practices yet. In terms of Convention 159, of course, we do encourage member states to implement the convention. It's also true that this convention has been adopted much before the CRPD, so it could also be updated in terms of the language and the approach, because it was quite maybe 40 years ago that it was adopted. Maybe I should not be saying that as an ILO representative, but it was a very visionary convention for that year, and now we would need to really implement it and to take it forward. And in terms of the way that it's implemented, we in the ILO, of course, also fully are in line with the CRPD, which is much more recent and updated. So that's what I would say. I would also encourage unions to and also all tripartite actors to really reopen their doors to organizations of persons with disabilities, as so we can work with the concept of nothing about us without us. And because there are still so few, I gave the ILO data this morning of persons with disabilities in the world of work, and I think we still agree on that. We cannot be sure that persons with disabilities are so active in unions, or they may not disclose their disabilities if those unions are not providing those spaces. It may be the case, it may not be the case. So again, I would only encourage unions and all tripartite organizations to fully work with organizations of persons with disabilities, as they are representative and they have a mandate to talk on behalf of persons with disabilities. Thank you. That would be it for now.
Thanks a lot. Alex, would you like to reply as well?
Yes, and while on the one hand it's I can say happily that has there been an increase in collective bargaining and efforts around employment and retention and training efforts to account for the needs and demands of workers with disability in trade union setting? The answer is yes, but however, the kind of degree of fruit that's borne has differed very dramatically across different contexts. I think situations where you have tripartite bargaining versus situations where you have enterprise bargaining, like here in the United States, where you've got bargaining happening between a unit of 20 people versus their employer, and the ability to kind of bring in top level priorities like that into the workplace there varies very dramatically based on local context. And so while I can for the most part progress is going on one direction and it's good, the how far it's gone is almost in no case enough and varies very dramatically based on the sector. And there are even situations within certain countries where it's very difficult for workers with disabilities to be covered by labor law in certain employment contexts. So there are situations where they're seen as kind of clients of their employer rather than workers in their own right. And so we find that in various situations, the kind of implementation through the process of social dialogue and kind of concrete advancements on the ground are sometimes very difficult, but we find things are going in the right direction, but the results are as varied as kind of the collective bargaining frameworks we have. So there's obviously much work to be done, but we think there's absolutely a growing intentionality and interest and understanding of the need to resolve this and deliver fruit through the tools of trade unionism, and we're working on it, but it looks very different in different contexts. So thanks very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Alex, and also an excellent point about the diversity of systems and the levels of the social dialogue as well, and also even within like already established structures of the dialogue, there can be such a variety on. So thanks a lot for pointing to this important matter. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, that convention is very much important, and I experienced like the change that could bring, but always what we observed is the states needs some additional, mobilizing factors or support, be it technical or at resource levels. There was this initiative certain years before, it's called Developing Entrepreneurship Among Women with Disabilities, whereby we all learned, as a stakeholders at Ethiopia level, how this convention should work. But at that particular time, I saw employers' federations and also trade unions were involved in the process and in providing support, particularly on areas of linkage to potential job opportunities. But the thing is, at the end, unless we really put a clear way forward for policy change, it will stop there when that partnership project ended. So that is the setback I witnessed, but otherwise, it's very much, useful convention, and at least experience that we can do a lot through familiarizing and pushing for the implementation of that convention. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I could not imagine the better way to end this side event. So thank you all for your participation. Thank you for bringing the different views in, and see you in the next 2 days in the various events and side events. Thank you. Bye-bye.